Welcome, audience. I'm Christy Wagner, your host. Our program today is about the hot trend of crowdfunding. Our experts are Mr. William Michael Cunningham, Mr. Henry W. Berger, and Mr. Howard Williams. William Michael Cunningham was born and brought up in D.C. He went to Howard University for undergrad, majoring in econ. Then he obtained a master's in economics from the University of Chicago. He also earned an MBA in finance at the University of Chicago, where his master's thesis advisor was Gary Becker, who is a Nobel laureate in economics. Mr. Cunningham is a Washington Post expert panelist and commentator in socially responsible investing. He's also one of the diversity investing advisors to CalPERS, the California Public Employees Retirement System, which is the second largest pension fund in the United States. He is one of the nation's experts on crowdfunding. In his spare time, Mr. Cunningham poses head-busting questions to the President of the United States, as he did to President Clinton at the 1996 White House Conference on Corporate Citizenship. Henry W. Berger holds a Bachelor of Business Studies degree from North Carolina Central University. He participated in a leadership program at Johns Hopkins University, and he is a master's degree holder in real estate from Georgetown University. Mr. Berger's areas of expertise are real estate and debt restructuring, in addition to crowdfunding. Mr. Howard Williams is a graduate of Norfolk State University with a BS in mathematics. As a management analyst for the state of Ohio with emphasis on return investments, he is now a resident of DC. Mr. Cunningham, what is the definition of crowdfunding?
Well, thank you for asking the question, Christy. Crowdfunding is open source financing. It's basically a tool and a technique that you can use to raise money for people, products, or projects online by inviting a community of like-minded people to contribute to your project, your person, or the product that you've developed.
Now, is it known what year and in what country crowdfunding was started, and who was its pioneer?
Well, in the U.S., typically people refer to two gentlemen out of, I think it was North Carolina, who basically helped to write and create the Jobs Act. But remember, crowdfunding goes back a lot longer. The Black Church, the Civil Rights Movement was crowdfunding because people passed the hat in support of a specific objective.
Now, here in the United States, the legislation making crowdfunding possible was signed April 5th of 2012. It's called the Jobs Act because its acronym stands for Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act. Please explain what specific ramifications this law has for crowdfunding.
Well, what the law did was it made crowdfunding legal for small businesses. So if you wanted to start a daycare center, a hair salon, or a tech company, and your revenues were less than $1 billion, it made it legal for you to go out on the internet and offer stock in that company up to $1 million per year in total equity that you can raise online.
What specific flaws are there in the traditional current banking financing which you think inspired the concept of crowdfunding?
Well, certainly traditional financing doesn't really work for a lot of small businesses, a lot of small business people. It doesn't really get the capital to where it's needed in a timely manner. So to support new companies, new ideas, even old companies and old ideas, a little daycare center, a hair salon in the community. So what crowdfunding does is it democratizes the access to capital so that anybody can access capital if they have a good enough idea.
Now, $1 million in investments is allowed by the Jobs Act, but what happens if the investment that you want exceeds $1 million? I mean, must a crowdfunding project be relegated to crowdfunding investments only, or can it be mixed funding? $1 million up to $1 million crowdfunding and then something else?
It can be mixed. You can raise $1 million in equity funding and add $1 million in debt funding to that for a total of $2 million, not via crowdfunding. You can only raise $1 million total in crowdfunded money, but you could combine private money and crowdfunded money.
What are the tax ramifications? By that I mean, what IRS form does a business file, and what happens, what state taxes do you pay if there are investors from several states that are your crowdfunders?
That's a question for a tax lawyer, but I'll give you the economist's answer, which is that basically it's the standard tax. Your 1040, your 1126 corporate returns, those sorts of things. You should not assume that crowdfunding is tax-free. Just assume that it's as if you walked down to the bank and got money. You're going to have to pay the same level of taxes on that.
What areas of endeavor are best served by crowdfunding, and conversely, which are the least served by crowdfunding?
Well, what we've seen so far are people with products, unique, innovative, interesting products that they create that are not fundable or can't break through the standard industry classification. So the Pebble Watch is the key example. We've also seen things like software and video games being developed using crowdfunding. So it's the same tech sector emphasis that you see. The kinds of things that aren't really suitable for crowdfunding are things that are hard to attach assets to. You know, it's hard, although there's some movement for people to crowdfund their education. Although we're seeing people do that. But it's harder to do that than it is for a watch or a daycare center or a hair salon.
What eligibility criteria would you say is best for a crowdfunding seeker?
For someone who's looking to crowdfund, really it's about authentication and validation, that you are who you say you are, and you can do what it is, or you have a strong chance of doing what it is that you're raising the crowdfunding money to do. So that's a very wide pool of people. It's all about passion, it's all about the product, it's all about the person or the project that you're seeking to fund. It's got to be innovative, unique, you have to be very passionate about it in order to raise the money. But other than that, it's really, this is what's so exciting about crowdfunding, it's really wide open.
What have you heard of, personally, are some of the most freaky, exotic, unusual projects that people have sought crowdfunding for?
There have been a lot. There was one which, you know, my colleagues here always get on me about saying, but there was a gentleman who raised $140,000 for a, let's say, a personal adult toy, non-kitchen, non-living room toy that he developed, added a spin to, added some unique capabilities to, and went out to the crowd and was able to raise $140,000. So you're limited by the human imagination.
It's harder whenever there's a bigger group. Pretty much a good day for me would be people leaving their hands off of me. I'm always called names. Everywhere that I go, there's always someone calling me names, calling me gay. I've been choked, thrown up against a wall, punched. Nobody's ever tried to help me.
Did you know that the federal government gave away over $500 billion in grants last year? Check out our website at www.piranhatanktv.org for more information on creative solutions to project financing, such as the Jobs Act of 2012, crowdfunding, and community benefits agreements.
Mr. Berger, you have stated that the Jobs Act, quote, will have a significant impact on how the Securities and Exchange Commission will regulate public offerings and private placements for small startup companies and the real estate entrepreneur, end quote. There are many people watching the show who are intelligent and hardworking, but not necessarily know sophisticated business terminology. So would you explain for us the difference between public offering and private placement?
That's a good question, Christy. One of the biggest changes as a result of the Jobs Act is the accreditation of individuals. Well, to be an investor, a private placement investment, you had to be an accredited investor. A accredited investor is an individual that earns over $100,000 a year and has a net worth over $1 million, or at least of $1 million. So that excludes a lot of us. So it's only probably 1% of the population. So now, as a result of the Jobs Act, that window has opened for the other 99% of the population. So that's one of the biggest changes that's come about as a result of the Jobs Act. Another one is if a company is offering a private placement, they were limited to only 500 investors. Once they hit that 501, a trigger went off with the SEC, and they had different accounting methods that they had to follow. Now that limit has been raised to 2,000. So there's a lot of investors, a lot of private companies that are excited about that opportunity as well.
What, if any, are the statutorily mandated eligibility requirements for an investor to be able to participate in crowdfunding?
Well, to participate in crowdfunding, there are some regulations that are in place saying how much you can invest. So if you wanted to participate in a crowdfunding and you earned less than $100,000 a year and had a net worth less than $100,000, the SEC has, with its preliminary regulations, have stated that you can't invest more than $2,000 a year or 5%, the greater of $2,000 a year or 5% of your income.
For your own protection.
For your own protection.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if your net worth is over $100,000 and your income exceeds $100,000, you're limited to 10% of your income up to $100,000 a year.
I see. Even if investors meet the guidelines of the law as it is now, the guidelines, maybe they're too few and they're too broad. So what protective measure would you advise that a crowdfunding seeker take in their selection of potential investors? I mean, would you recommend that they present a financial statement that's audited or certified somehow?
We definitely recommend that people do their due diligence and researching the companies that they want to invest in. Now, we are speaking of equity crowdfunding. And there's four different methods of crowdfunding. You have donation-based crowdfunding, reward, equity, and debt. Now, we are speaking of equity and debt crowdfunding, and you want to do your due diligence with that company. Once the rules are released, or what we anticipate some of the rules to be, is if a company is offering an investment, a security, and over less than $100,000, they're going to have to provide financial statements certified by the CEO for an equity or debt. Now, if it's anywhere from $100,000 to $500,000, they'll have to have financial statements audited by a CPA. Over $500,000, they'll have to be audited and certified by a CPA in order to participate in a crowdfunding campaign.
How much time after an investor commits must he or she come up with the money?
Well, that's interesting because here again, the crowdfunding platforms are internet-based. And so when you go on, if you were to go online and you said that you found a project or an idea or a business that you were interested in, you would contribute or decide to buy a few shares of that company. So
instantly?
Yeah, the money is, you're contributing that money instantly. Most of the campaigns run from anywhere from 30 to 45 days. So some of the actual money isn't taken until the end of the campaign. So you are taken instantly. The money's taken instantly.
Now, startups often have very little money. They can barely survive, and they don't have money to have an in-house captive attorney or to have one on retainer, or possibly even not to pay for legal counsel on an hourly basis. But would you recommend that a crowdfunding seeker retain legal counsel, and if so, what should the attorney's specialty be in?
Yes, we definitely recommend that you attain legal counsel. Now, we are speaking again of equity and debt crowdfunding. If you're doing a donation or a reward-based crowdfunding, you might not need to have the legal counsel involved or a CPA, even though you need to have your business plan in place. But once you enter the realm of equity and debt, you are going to need to seek legal counsel. And most attorneys that deal with either small business startups and securities should be able to handle a crowdfunding campaign.
Is it legally possible for a crowdfunding seeker to put on his second hat and also become a crowdfunding investor in his own project?
Not in his own project, no.
Okay.
So that's one of the catches, to make sure that we, like Bill said earlier, that the project is authenticated and validated. We don't want people funding their own or look at having an appearance.
Like a notary cannot notarize his own documents.
You wouldn't let money just blow out of your house. So when your AC or heater is on, make sure the doors, windows, and fireplace flue are shut tight. If you're headed out, turn down the AC or lower the heat by 10 degrees. And always keep your water heater set at 120. A little bit of common sense goes a long way. Get more great tips at energysaver.gov.
Did you know that the federal government gave away over $500 billion in grants last year? Check out our website at www.piranhatankTV.org for more information on creative solutions to project financing, such as the Jobs Act of 2012, crowdfunding, and community benefits agreements.
Mr. Williams, tell me about the Crowdfunding World Summit that took place in year 2013 from December 3rd through December 16th and featured over 65 speakers. I know that Microsoft and the Royce Law Firm, as well as the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council, were among the sponsors, so it had to be legitimate. Was this the first of its kind? Do you know?
Actually, it wasn't the first of its kind. Maybe the first of its magnitude, not the first of its kind. Obviously, there were some smaller ones here and there, but of this magnitude, yes. And like you said, two-week summit conference, and it was online. It was the beauty of it. And what made it so great was that online presence is exactly what crowdfunding is all about. So it brought in that piece, and as you said, with investors like Microsoft, it went to show just the potential and the magnitude that crowdfunding had at the time.
What is the value of such an online global crowdfunding conference? What do the crowdfunding seekers get out of it?
Well, crowdfunding seekers get out of, with all of this, as anyone would see, with Microsoft, big companies being involved, that goes to show the validity and the legitimacy of that field of crowdfunding in general. So that's going to garner interest from smaller businesses that also want to make small investments in smaller companies as well.
Now, is the company, association, or entire organization legally allowed to be an investor and collectively be considered as a single entity? For example, could you get everybody from your local AME Baptist church to chip in for your project?
Yes and no. Yes, they can, but as long as they have less than $1 billion in revenue within a year.
Billion with a B.
Yes, billion with a B. As long as they have less than $1 billion in revenue within a year, yes, they can contribute as an entity.
Now, if several people are together in a startup business as, say, owners and or founders, isn't it complicated for them to file their individual tax returns? Because what would their profits be based on? Would it be based on salary alone, or how is that calculated in a crowdfunding scenario?
Right. Well, it all depends on, it changes and varies from company to company. Some companies have more people, and it also depends on the share within the company. If someone is an employee, it all depends on their share. It all depends on their salary. So it really varies. To give a general answer, that would be it.
If someone got financed by crowdfunding prior to the enactment of legislation recognizing crowdfunding, can a person file an amended tax return afterwards to gain the benefits of crowdfunding? And if so, how many years afterwards would they be allowed to file this amended return?
I'm not sure specifically in terms of after that date, that April 5th date. But any monies that they got before that date, they would have to file regularly. Not a tax lawyer, not an accountant at all, but whatever they would have to fill out, whether it be a 1040, 1099, whatever the case, they would just go along just like a regular salary would be, or regular money.
In your
would be.
estimation, Mr. Williams, what are the pros and cons of crowdfunding?
Well, some of the pros of crowdfunding would be that it's low risk, which means that anyone can do it. Anyone can put up a campaign online, and so that cuts down on that aspect, as well as less risk. Because anyone can put up a campaign, they have to basically follow, as Mr. Cunningham said earlier, they have to follow the authentication and validation. So no one's going to give money to any campaign that they don't believe in or that they don't see works. But on the con side of it, it takes hard work, and as Henry said, due diligence. You have to put in the work. You have to have the social capital. If you don't, you have to build it.
It's not instant glory.
Right, it's not instant glory. Simplistic concept, complex application though.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. William Michael Cunningham, Mr. Henry W. Berger, and Mr. Howard Williams.
Did you know that the federal government gave away over $500 billion in grants last year? Check out our website at www.piranhatankTV.org for more information on creative solutions to project financing, such as the Jobs Act of 2012, crowdfunding, and community benefits agreements.
Hart, what's going on?
I'm leaving.
Why? What did I do?
Not enough. You constantly ignore me. You barely eat anything healthy. You're half as active as you used to be. The pressure is just too much. I quit.
Okay, I get it. I'll do better. Just please, don't leave.
Okay. But remember, if I go, you go.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you. Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
Mr. Sebastian Murray is a graduate of the University of Mississippi, where he majored in computer science and minored in marketing. Mr. Murray is the executive producer of our show on crowdfunding. He is a DC TV producer and a financing expert in the field of grants, loans, equity, and angel financing. Mr. Murray, please explain to our audience what angel funding is. I mean, to me, anyone who would invest in my project is an angel.
Well, an angel funder is usually someone who has expertise in terms of funding different projects. They're not as aggressive as venture capitalists are, where they look for a large percentage of your company in exchange for a small percentage of funding of your particular project.
What commonalities and differences does angel funding have versus crowdfunding?
Well, one of the differences is the number of people that you have, the smaller amounts. With crowdfunding, usually you may have anywhere from $1, $5, $10, or $20 where the crowd invests, whereas an angel funder may invest $100,000, $200,000, and you just have one investor. So that's kind of the difference between those two.
What, please, are the differences between grant funding, equity funding, and loan financing?
Okay, one of the key differences between grant funding is there's a lot of grants out there where basically you're given money to complete a certain project. You have nonprofit grants, you have for-profit grants, you have public grants, and you have government grants. Government grants are things where the different agencies, there's about 23 plus agencies, federal agencies, that provide grants to the public. And those grants, you can find information on those grants at www.grants.gov. And in FY13, out of the 23 agencies, they gave away over $513 billion.
Oh my gosh, billion with a B.
Exactly. So there's a lot of opportunity in terms of grants on the federal side. Then there's what they call private grants, where a small organization that may have a specific mission or purpose, such as diversityfund.org. They're a private financing organization. They're nonprofit, and they've provided funding for different smaller projects, but their funding is smaller, maybe $50,000 or something like that. Debt financing is the type of financing where it's usually collateralized with something, either real estate or some asset. or something like that. So that's kind of the difference between the debt financing, the equity, and the grant part.
Are there stringent regulations about what collateral is acceptable?
Well, it varies from organization to organization. For example, banks, they may have very stringent requirements for making a loan. They may want the particular real estate project that you're investing in, and they may also want your personal residence as collateral as well. Anything that they can get their hands on, they want that additional collateral. Angel investors, their requirements may not be as stringent as the banks are. So that's some of the differences between the banks and an angel investor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore.